Welcome to Peas in a Podcast. If you've ever thought, why didn't somebody tell me this when I started running a business, you are in the right place.
Each week we unpack the human stuff that makes or breaks your business without the corporate wank. This week we are talking about
making teams work and collective productivity.
Juicy.
Yeah.
Okay.
And what do we mean by that, right?
What we mean by that. So oftentimes when we are coaching and developing and training managers or founder managers, we are dealing with individual performance. So we're talking about whether somebody is doing well in their job or not and what you do about it. But where we find managers come unstuck is when they are responsible for more than one person, 2, 3, 4, up to, probably no more than 10 in our world. And they have a collective performance problem.
So this is when there's not a glaringly obvious capability or conduct issue with a specific individual or couple of individuals. There's just a general feeling that the team isn't producing or doing what they need to do as a collective body, right?
Yeah. I mean, you may well have one or two really quite problematic individuals within it, but you couldn't perhaps pinpoint that as being the overriding factor. It's that there are more serious problems with some, less serious with others, a general feeling of apathy, perhaps, maybe individuals who are not inclined to want to perform, maybe individuals that are not working well with each other. Things just aren't on track and feeling like they're humming along. And you're not quite sure as a manager what you need to do, what levers you need to pull to put that right, because it all kind of feels too big and too fuzzy.
And too nuanced, probably, right? And I guess it's helpful for us to come back to kind of the theories of team development, right? In terms of understanding the stages that a group of people, or what starts with a group of people, how they progress to become a fully functioning, productive, performance optimized team.
Yeah.
Right? And there's a lot of theory behind this.
There's a lot of theory, and I think it starts with that there is a difference between a group and a team. And actually, some people might not even realize that as a starting point, that just because you have assembled a group of individuals together doesn't mean that they are going to operate well as a team. There is a difference. There are a number of characteristics that convert a group of operators into a fully functioning team. Which are. So the first is a common purpose, something that they all collectively contribute to. So something that is bigger than them as a shared mission, if you like, that they are working towards. There's also the sense of feeling accountable to each other. So if one person or two people aren't pulling their weight, we often hear that, or pitching in, they feel a sense of letting each other down. They feel that they want to perform and pitch in and make a contribution. And if they don't, that they're not just their manager, but their colleagues will pick up on that and that they won't have felt that they've pulled their weight.
So some mutual accountability towards each other. Yeah,
absolutely. There's an interconnectedness about the work. So it's perfectly acceptable that in a team you play to people's strengths, and it's perfectly acceptable that in a team you will have individual roles, responsibilities, and we want the clarity we always talk about and the delineation between those so that there's effectiveness and not too much overlap and the right hand knows what the left hand is doing. But nevertheless, if we're working together against a shared mission, we want to be interconnected as a team and rely on each other. We're in this together.
Okay.
And then the last factor that differentiates a group of people from a team is that the people who are in the team believe in the power of a team. And this is a really, really important one, because if you have individuals within a team who don't believe in the efficacy of teamwork, then it undermines everything else, because there are countless studies and countless pieces of research that evidence the fact that when you put individuals together, their contribution grows exponentially. Results are exponentially better. And I use the example of the horse, the cart horse. I love that you're laughing at me. Why are you laughing at me? Is it because I can't say exponential?
No, it's because I have a favourite phrase, don't I? That coins what you've just said really well. Can I say it? Please let me say it.
I'm going to let you say it, but I have to finish the point, and then I think you can come in like a mic drop.
Okay. Love that. Okay. I'm ready.
Don't worry. Just stay poised and don't cock it up. Okay. She's waited her whole life for this.
It's that moment in time, Whitney Houston.
So we know a really great illustration of this is cart horses. So actual horses that pull carts, right? One horse can pull 800 pounds worth of weight behind it. Two horses can pull somewhere between 24,000 and 32,000 pounds of weight. So that is a demonstration, she's still laughing, of the exponential results, because together each achieves more. That really wanky saying, but it's true. Go on then.
Okay. So it would be like saying the strength of the pack is the wolf and the strength of the wolf is the pack, right?
Yes.
Start together in there.
And the reason this is such a poignant moment for Becky is because this saying nearly got plastered all over our very first website. Yes. And I had to beg and plead with that. Not only that, but several Walt Disney quotes, nearly, believe it or not, nearly came from Becky into our first website. But it's true, yeah.
Not even a Disney fan.
I know, yeah.
But that's the point, right? You assemble a group of people with complementary but different and diverse skill sets and strengths, different approaches, different values, and they all come together and they create something that I'm going to say really ineloquently, the sum of what's the term? The sum of the parts.
That's it. Yeah.
What is it?
Yeah. Together we will achieve more than the sum of our parts. It's that is exactly the right saying, which is really unusual for you.
Do you like to mesh together certain analogies?
Exactly.
Yes. Okay, so how do we get to that point though, right? We talk about collective performance and what it can achieve when a team is functioning, they're cohesive, they're self-aware, they're all playing to their strengths. The relationships are really strong. But we know when you take a group of individuals, that's your starting point, right? Whether it's because you're building a new team for the first time, or you've employed your first couple of employees, or whether it's because you are a new manager and you have walked into an existing team, or a team has been restructured in a certain way, or new people have joined the team, or you start a new project. Whatever the scenario may be, you've got a starting point where you have a group of individuals and a lot of uncertainty and a lot of lacking structure. And you've somehow got to get from there to a fully functioning team.
Yes, absolutely. And this is where the stages of team development that we've explored in a training session this morning actually really come into play. Do you want to go through them? Because you did this slide.
I did do this slide. And it's funny because it's full circle for me, because I learned this in part of my own management training back in 2002. And for me, this model still has a lot of applicability. And we're talking about Tuckman's team development model, which was a model I think initially designed back in the 60s for project management, and it works, but it also works in terms of helping us understand as managers and help us manage expectations as well around what stage our team are in, and manages our expectations around what we can realistically expect of them by way of output based on that stage, right? So the first stage, that forming. So we're talking about if anybody's heard about it before, the forming, storming, norming, performing, and then we've added a couple of extra stages on just for good measure, because we like to do stuff like that. So the starting stage being the forming stage, right? And that's when you're at that point where you have a group of individuals, where those roles and those responsibilities of those individuals are not necessarily well defined. There is a lack of clarity. There is a need for a manager to be really, really visible, really, really present, to be very highly directive. At this point in a stage of group development, the manager is the only source of consistency and stability. They are the person that has the answers to all the questions, and there's a lot of unanswered questions inherent in this stage. Then we move on to the second stage, which was coined storming. And I think that's because what's representative of that stage is a high sense of chaos. Because in the first stage, these groups of individuals, and you probably see it in any other group setting, people when they first meet each other are always really polite. They're sussing each other out. They're always really nice to each other. They're tentative. They're not quite sure as to where they stand. And there's quite a lot of vulnerability in that. So there was a lot of politeness in the first stage. The second stage is when people have got to know each other a little bit more, but there's still a high degree of uncertainty. There's still a lack of clarity and definition around those roles and responsibilities and who's here to do what. But there's a lot more comfort. And as a result, there's a lot more confidence. And as a result, there's a lot more conflict. There's more power struggles. There's people vying to be respected. So the first stage is about, am I going to be accepted? The second stage is, am I going to be respected? And people start to engage in some behaviours and conduct to try and get that respect needs met, but in a way that is probably quite unhealthy because there is still a lack of structure, a lack of understanding as to what these people are here to do and who is supposed to be doing what in relation. So I think that's quite a chaotic stage, and one that a manager, I think, it's really helpful to consciously recognise when you've got a team in that stage, because there's a lot of influence a manager can have in that scenario to move it on very quickly, to resolve those conflicts, to create that clarity and that structure, to put the resources in place, to set the expectation, to give. That's when you start thinking about purpose and values and what that bigger picture is that you're all aiming for, and you start to communicate that clearer to the team, and those boundaries and those behavioural expectations as to how you're going to get there. That's moving into the norming stage. So you can learn a lot in the storming stage, and then you move into the norming stage and you start to put all of those interventions and that stuff in place for performance to start becoming more consistent. So you can take a step back as a manager from having to provide quite high levels of direction, and you can start to more coach and facilitate. Employees inherently, as part of those resources and that support being put in place, become more competent and then more and as a result more stable in the jobs they're doing. And that helps create more consistency with their performance and their outputs. And that then, and providing the manager continues to effectively work on continuous improvement, continuing to invest in those processes and those systems, those communication channels. That's when you start to put in feedback. And you start to think about incentivization, reward and recognition schemes. That's when a manager can very quickly move a team from good to great. And that's from the norming stage to the performing stage, which is the performance optimized state that we talk about quite a lot, right? Where teams are functioning. They have got very clear understandings around what their role is, how it fits into a bigger purpose, how that everybody is playing to their strengths. There's more flex, there's more autonomy, there's more agility, to ensure that everybody's doing what they need to be doing and playing their part to achieve an overall mission, which is really clear. A leader is enabling and facilitating as opposed to coaching and managing and directing. It's just a much healthier place to be. And there's all of those mechanisms that a manager starts to bring in at that stage to ensure that teams maintain that performing state. So that's when we are looking at things like professional development opportunities, keeping an eye on the market and market trends and making sure that you're moving with the times and that you're pivoting your services or your product in line with how the market's developed, that you're staying relevant, whatever that means, that your team are staying engaged and motivated. And we do a lot of work around that and how managers can do that in a sustained and quite meaningful way that suits individual motivators and acknowledges the fact that people are motivated and engaged by different things. So that's a really lengthy way of working through the stages of group development that effectively result from a group of individuals to a fully functioning, really productive, cohesive team, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think what's really interesting about the stages and why I think they are so relevant is the trend of performance at each stage. So when people are in the forming stage, they're a little bit nervous. They don't know their place. They're unsure. They don't want to make any big moves. The ego part of them is probably thinking, keep your head down, be keen, be excited, show up as the best version of yourself. So actually we see people come in at a level of performance which could lull the manager into a little bit of a false sense of security that I've got a great team, everything's shiny, that kind of almost early rose tinted glasses phase of in the first flushes of everything being great, because the performance, although not optimized because people aren't there with the experience and know where everything is and figured all the stuff out that you just said, they are optimistic, keen and ready to make a great impression. When they start getting that confidence, the ego kicks in and they have to, like you say, then feel the need to vie for attention or make their mark. And what's really interesting about the storming stage is this is obviously when performance dips to its lowest point across all four stages. So you'd think that the trend would curve up as you go through the stages. It actually doesn't. It starts at a place of kind of acceptable performance where people are keen. And when we're talking about performance, we're talking just as much about attitude and behaviours and effective teamwork as we are about practical results here as well and tangible metrics. But during the storming phase, that goes downhill again and then starts to creep back up to norming and then levels off at performing to the optimum rate. So that can be a really interesting concept for a manager to wrap their heads around.
I think it's also helpful in terms of managing expectations of a manager around how well a team are going to perform at each level. I think we have seen those managers through the work we do that have brought a group of people together that are only 6 months old and they can't understand why they're not doing what they would need them to do. And there is probably a misalignment there around the expectations that they could possibly expect around what that team are going to be able to produce at that stage where they've only known each other for 6 months. We then tend to dig a little bit deeper and ask more questions and find out that those roles haven't been defined, that the organisation isn't even clear itself around its own sense of purpose or its own identity or what it was created to achieve, that there has been no processes or efficiencies identified and put in place. There's been very little investment of thought around enablement of those individuals to do their job well. There's been little understanding placed on the importance of those people building relationships with each other and being able to appreciate and understand and get to know each other's strengths, professional strengths and attributes, to be able to then work out how they're going to each play to them and leverage them. So I think there is something there around a manager understanding that the output that they can expect from a team is going to be entirely dependent on which stage a team are at. It's quite often not a conscious decision or piece of analysis that a manager does. And therefore we have those managers that think that a team should be producing certain outputs whilst not recognising that they could be in the storming stage. And there's a lot of work the manager needs to do and a lot of investment the manager needs to put in to get the team to that performing stage when they can reasonably expect those outputs to start being hit.
Yeah, and I think that this is about helping managers understand at this point the level of influence they have over moving people through the stages. So based on what we've just talked about with performance and appreciating the fact that there's a limit to what you can expect from people in a given time frame, and it may be 6 months, it may be much shorter, depending on the complexity of what this team is set out to achieve, depending on what's involved. Every team will be different, but every team will likely go through these stages. It's always interesting that it's not typically linear as well. They can bounce back and forth a little bit, just like the change curve. You can bounce a little bit around between stages, and sometimes there might be an external setback, something that's outside of your control, not within your control, that can make people feel destabilized and then go backwards because it's not all plain sailing. So again, it's coming down to the manager to go, okay, well, what might be happening here? And more importantly, what version of me do they need to move them through these stages? I think there's probably also something there around the understanding of storming. And everybody talks about avoidance of conflict. We've just done a podcast on it. And actually, we keep making the point that conflict is not only needed, it's helpful. The difference between conflict and storming is that we haven't worked out at that point as a team how to have conflict effectively and in a healthy way. So that's why storming is undesirable. Well, we want to keep hold of the conflict. We know that's a key function of a team, to be able to exchange ideas in order to make sure everybody commits to the one that is finally decided on. So we want to be able to keep that conflict, but move through storming, where it's much more about vying for attention and spots and ego. It's more ego driven, and it's less helpful in terms of the behaviors you're going to observe. But where this is probably most helpful for managers is thinking about the sorts of strategies, activities, things they can do or affect, the influence they have in moving somebody from stage to stage. And this again links back to another podcast we did around leadership style for me. You've mentioned already there that actually in a forming stage, we want to be appreciative of the fact that people are new to the role and potentially the team. We want to know that they can be developed, be coached, potentially be a bit patient with them. We probably need to be quite visionary to be able to tell them what the big picture is, what this team is set up to do, what its purpose is as part of the wider organisational picture, even if it's a very small team within a very small organisation. What does this team exist to do together, as opposed to what do I exist to do within this organisation? It's that next part of the puzzle, reinforcing that clear line of sight, as we talk about it, between the part they play as an individual, the part they play in their team, their first team, and the part that that team plays in the organisation. And a manager is absolutely responsible for making sure, one, they understand that clear line of sight and they've got that clear in their own head, but two, that they can then pass that on to the team so that they understand what they are there, what they exist to do, but also setting some early expectations around how they would like to be together. And this is the investment we rarely see happen. It's about relational dynamics. It's about getting people to the point where they do trust each other, where they understand how they want to operate as a team, how they're going to communicate, making sure that's set up, making sure that they understand when these slightly potentially toxic storming behaviours kick in, that the manager then moves to a more hands-on, directive, potentially commanding style, where they set the bar in terms of this is not okay and we're not going to talk to each other like this, and this isn't how we settle it, it's not how we make decisions, by making it really clear where their decision-making authority sits and whether they are within their rights to have really strong opinions, and if they have them, how they go, where the appropriate forums are to voice them, so that you don't get a situation where you're not listening and you don't have those forums, so they will find their own. And that might be having a fag in the car park or on a WhatsApp thread, where they decide they're going to create their own small forum to continue that storming behaviour and create silos within the team because they align themselves. They're still looking for where they fit. They're going to align themselves to somebody that agrees with them or is similar to them, which is safety.
And I think there's an interesting point here around the part that mediated conversations play, right? When you have employees that are equally as passionate as each other, but they've come from really different places in terms of personalities. So imagine two strong employees equally as capable in very different areas, really strong personalities, really strong passion for wanting to do a good job, but they're rubbing each other up the wrong way. They're conflicting, and there isn't those boundaries or that clarity of expectations in place to be able to effectively control and govern some of the conduct, the unhealthy conduct that might come out as a result. And that's when a mediated confronting the issue through a mediated conversation, and I'm not talking full on mediation, I'm talking about the manager's ability to sit two people down and say, right, you might not like each other, you might come from very different places, but you need to be able to work together effectively. And that is completely reasonable for a manager to expect.
Yeah.
And completely reasonable for the manager to expect two individuals to engage in a conversation around how they are going to achieve that. And a manager has a part to play in facilitating that conversation very neutrally, fairly, setting some ground rules around both people having the opportunity to say their piece and to be heard, that they can reasonably expect the other person, when they're listening, to engage active listening, so listening to hear as opposed to listening to respond, that they don't interrupt each other, and that the end result is they both walk away with a set of commitments, even if it's only one or two, as to how they are going to work differently or approach work in a different way to enable them to work more effectively with that person to achieve the common goal that the team is in place to achieve. And I think mediation principles plays an important part in those conversations, and managers' desire to have them as well, and not it's that going back to that avoiding conflict. Like, if you can catch it at that level, where you've still got two really passionate, two really engaged people, and you want them both, they're both equally as capable, they're just coming at it from very different places, and as a result they're creating a friction that is starting to feel unhealthy. You catch it at that stage, and you can have a very neutral conversation where you can place mutual accountability on both of them to play their part to start making this feel better for them to be able to work more productively together. That's the goal, right?
Absolutely. And it helps you move through the storming, because it sends a clear message that actually we're not going to stay like this. This isn't we're not normalizing this. And I think it's the same for the next stage on. You know, if you are able to successfully move through that storming phase quite quickly, if you have people that are generally pretty even tempered and not quite so ego driven, then you'll probably quite successfully, and maybe with very little intervention, move through that stage to a place where people are norming away and doing just about okay. And we see that trend of performance go up a little bit, because actually they're starting to find their feet and they understand what they're doing and all the things you said. What's really interesting is then when a manager perhaps thinks, oh, we got there, and they take their foot off the gas. And we're talking about the high performing team as though it's not as rare as hen's teeth, but it's as rare as hen's teeth. There's a reason there is so many articles, textbooks, blogs on creating high-performing teams. And I think Patrick Lencioni says it better than anybody else. It's probably the most valuable thing that you can invest in, and the least invested in thing. It's the rarest thing to find. And that comes directly from, I think, 5 Dysfunctions of a Team, which is another wonderful book. Go read it if you've got time, because it talks about team dynamics in a way that's so simple. It's for anyone. But we'll talk about that perhaps another day. But it's true to say that norming can be normalized too. And actually the manager doesn't do that extra piece of performance optimization work to stretch the team, not wring them out, not burn them out, not make them go faster, harder, whatever, you think you need to do, but really allow them to take the ownership themselves. And I find this most often with managers who want to stay in a directive role beyond the team needing them to stay in a directive role, that I can do this better myself. I know best. I was the original practitioner in my own business, not allowing them to take the mantle and go, well, we can do this different and better, like between us exponentially. Let us make this better. Let us evolve. We'll take it from here. Now, obviously, we still need boundaries and we still need controls, but we know that people are super, super engaged when they are able to take ownership and innovate and come up with ideas and shape things. So for a manager to be able to get out of norming and into performing, they have to be really super brave and step away and allow the team to go for it. Yeah. And fail if they need to. And that's scary when it's your own business. But they will start to come up with results that you didn't even see coming.
And I love that, because if you've recruited the right people in the right roles, why wouldn't you as a leader want to get them to a stage where they can function without you? Yes. But you're right, we see it, don't we? And that's step between norming and performing, that good to great, what makes a good team move to being a great team, is about that leadership mindset, and about being able to impose that leadership mindset on the team and give them a chance to be their own leaders.
Yeah.
Whatever leading in an organization means. It's about delegation and ownership and empowerment and shared leadership. And you're right. A manager has to be brave and has to be able to have complete trust in their team and that team's individual abilities to feel confident to take that next step. And sometimes we see it not happening because the team aren't fully there yet. And sometimes we see it not happening just because of the manager's own limited beliefs. Yeah. Would that be a good way of saying it?
I think it would. Either limited beliefs, nervousness because it is your business, it is your baby, which is entirely understandable. I think also people like to feel valuable, people like to feel busy, and they like to feel like nobody can do things as well as they can. That's kind of the human condition, really. And I think we've all been there, where we think we're stronger in some areas than other people. Some people are control freaks. They just like things done one way, and they are limited by their own imagination, and they don't appreciate that there are other ways of thinking and that diversity can drive massive success. It takes a lot of bravery. We've also seen managers who don't get to performing and think, I want to get hands off. We've almost got the ones that want to push fast forward, and they do so without the team infrastructure being in place. So they're kind of abandoning them at storming norming, and then they're wondering why actually they're not ready. It's quite difficult, and it is highly nuanced to figure out when can I ease off, not step off completely and leave them with absolutely no infrastructure to just figure it out, because that will take them back. They'll all start blaming and pointing the finger as to why they missed something or why it didn't happen, because actually there wasn't the infrastructure. The manager hadn't done that investment piece before they decided they were going to step away, and that's damaging as well.
Okay, all right. So let's bring this back to the real world and away from the theoretical models. What is the stuff that managers need to be doing on a day-to-day, week-by-week, month-by-month basis to build, maintain and nurture effective teams that produce results?
That's a very big question, and it will vary hugely business by business, but there are some consistent activities that we would be recommending that managers make sure are happening in order to do that, in order to nurture collective performance. So when we're talking about collective performance, we're talking about getting the team together in some way, shape or form, or data and sharing information with them that affects more than one of them. So in terms of any objective, the two things we need to know is, what do we want to achieve and how do we know when we've got there? And we do that with individuals all the time. It's exactly the same with teams. If we're looking at collective performance, we might be looking at something like a sales target. We might be looking at a number of customers we want to see. We might be looking at a financial revenue model. We might be looking at number of phone calls taken. We might be looking at number of appointments sat. But there's normally some kind of figure or marker that indicates acceptable performance within this team that is in some way shared or set of data. So it might not be that everyone's working on exactly the same thing, but you're able to put the different things together to make a picture or a dashboard. So I'm going to use an example back in our Welfare to Work days. We all ran on different programs and projects within our office to help people back to work. There might have been 3 or 4 people on the good old New Deal for Disabled People, and we needed to get 4 people each to work a month. So there was 12 people that needed to go in from that contract. We also needed to make sure that we had 3 people hit a sustained marker, so they were into work for 13 weeks. We need to make sure that we had less than 20% people fail to attend appointments. But we would have had other people who were doing perhaps some administrative work that knew that 60% of the caseload were engaged at any time. So that's just an example of how you can have people working on different things, but actually there were markers across the team that meant that things were successful. And actually what was even better was understanding how, if we help each other out, how we can get those things to happen. So if I can get the admin team to make phone calls to collect job evidence, to book me in, to make sure it was going to be ready, I know I can go and get that evidence really effectively. So again, it's working out as a manager what acceptable performance looks like week by week, month by month, year by year, whatever it is. Again, it suits the business, and then help people understand it and see it. Again, in really small businesses, you don't have to overcomplicate it. If you haven't got figures, you might have behavioural standards. You might have things like, we want the phone answered in 3 rings and we want that to happen to all the phone calls. And you might have a way, because we've got great phone systems, of being able to capture that. So just like any other performance management cyclical approach, it starts with planning performance. What does good look like for this team? What do they exist to do? When would I start to get peeved off if things weren't happening? There's your marker. And then working out how you're going to know it's been hit. How are you recording, tracking? Are you observing it? And working out, are you using CRMs, for example? And then working out how you're going to tell them whether they've hit it or not, and feed that back, and in what forum. So we see all sorts of things, from whiteboards, if you're in an office, to dashboards. This is what your Monday.coms are for. This is your CRMs. This is what these things are for. Team meetings, huddles. We've got clients that do daily huddles, values huddles for when we're talking about reaffirming how we operate and what those acceptable behavioural standards are. We have team charters. We recommend, let's draw up kind of how we want to operate together. We have standard operating procedures. We have opportunities to come together and connect. What we've talked about so far has been quite practical, tactical by nature. And of course, that's why we're all here. We're not here to just have fun with each other, but we know, just like individuals, that having a sense of belonging in a team and a sense of interdependency and interconnectedness is super important. So is there sufficient time for people to establish relationships with each other, or are we operating a sweatshop? Have we got time to do something maybe a little bit fun? Do we go out for drinks on a Friday if we're that kind of place to work? Do we make sure that we do recognition and an employee of the month around our values? Do we offer shout outs? Do we offer people the opportunity to buddy up and peer with each other? Have we got working groups? Have we got projects that people can do for fun on the side? We've had walking clubs, we've had book clubs, we've had people who come in and kind of show and tell things that are proud of them. We've had shared learning experiences where people come in and talk about their work so that other people understand it. These are all interventions that people might see as a bit of a luxury, but actually they serve to connect people in a way that they can build trust and build rapport and actually enjoy wanting to come to work and work with each other, which we know is a really key motivator. So those are some sort of typical examples that we see. There are absolutely loads of things you can do. It's just consciously realizing as a manager that it's not just about managing the performance of the people who report to you. It's about taking that one level up your thinking too. And if all those do the things I want them to do, what are we doing together? Because ultimately, I hate to break the news, that's your target as a manager. So if you have a manager, if you're not a founder manager, that would be what you would be measured by, the success of that collective group of people beneath you. And in a typical organisation, you get to decide how you make that work, but it's your job to make it work.
And if you are a founder manager, then ultimately the success of your team is a reflection on how successful you are as a business owner.
Yeah. And that's that really difficult move that we talk about a lot between being a practitioner in your own business to being what we would call a player manager, to use a football analogy, a manager that actually plays, because you're not likely to be in a luxurious position of just being a manager coach? And if you are, congratulations, hats off to you. How did you do it?
That's $1 million question, right?
Exactly.
Oh, we love what we do. I don't think we'd ever want to work away from the client.
No, totally joking.
Okay.
That's it for this week. Don't forget to subscribe so you never miss an episode. Share this podcast with your network and follow us on our socials at PIAP Consulting.
Join us next time. And until then, just remember, people problems won't fix themselves.
And healthy cultures never happen by accident.
See you next Tuesday.